and it was cold. I remember it was like maybe 40 degrees, but it was like raining. It held on us. Wind was blowing, and I was just dressed in like shorts and a t-shirt, and I was out there for like 3.5 hours.
Hey, welcome to the Knight's Path podcast. This is Matt Kelly, and I have a special guest today, David C Whiteley Jr. And that's a mouthful, brother.
That's right.
So
Don't want to get mixed up with anybody else.
Yeah, there you go.
We're doing really well. Thanks for inviting me over today.
You bet. So selfishly, I wanted to get this podcast together so I could find out more about David. He's got an interesting hobby and hobbies, I'm sure. But so first and foremost, tell us about yourself, where you grew up, what part of the country you're in, and what you were kind of into, high school, college, or whatever, and what got you into the trade you're doing now.
Sure. So I have kind of a interesting background. It's a little bit, it kind of bounces around a lot. We moved around quite a bit when I was growing up. So my dad was he's a computer programmer, and he learned to program computers back, before programming computers was cool. And so he was a private contractor, and kind of bounced around a little bit before he sort of settled down to where he's actually worked for the same company now or contracted with them now for, gosh, I don't know, 20, 30 years. But so I've lived in, Montana, Wyoming, Utah, Wisconsin, Florida, been all over the place. But I claim Northern Virginia as kind of my growing up spot, because that's where I lived for, I guess, the biggest portion of time growing up, kind of my high school years. Okay. So it's kind of the Warrenton, Manassas area, for anybody who might be familiar with that. So we, and growing up, we were homeschooled as well, which again, back in the, in the 80s and 90s, and that was before homeschooling was cool. So it was a little bit of a unique thing. My mom put a lot of work into that. There weren't the resources available that there are today. And so she spent a lot of time, and really grateful for, all the work and effort that she put into raising us, the right way, and preparing us, for life. And one of the things that we were able to take advantage of growing up, living so close to Washington, D.C. was just the amazing number of historical, monuments and museums. And I really developed a real gratitude and passion for, the founding of our country, what those people went through in order to, bring about the freedoms and the types of things that we're able to enjoy today. So that was, that was kind of my growing up life. Because I was homeschooled, I had the fortunate flexibility to go to college early, which I'm not sure was a good thing necessarily, but I did go to college. My first year of college was the year I turned 17. So I was actually 16.
Wow. Holy cow.
My freshman year of college. And it wasn't because I was, like super smart or anything. I mean, I did fine, but it was just, I was kind of done with, the high school curriculum that we were working through, and, that was what was next. So my first year of college was at a little tiny school in Virginia, Southern Virginia University, which is actually an equestrian school. And so I actually rode horses my first year of college, which I'd never done before.
Oh, that's awesome. And plus you're 17, you're in person too, right? So was that like culture shock to be in a classroom, and now you're at the college level? And
it not really. And I think what sort of helped with that was it was a very small school. I mean, I think there was 250 students at this very, very small college, right? So that helped. I mean, you knew everybody. It was more of a family atmosphere. But I think socially it was a challenge for me because most of the students there were older than I was, obviously. And some were quite a bit older. And so, I didn't feel like I really fit in that well. But, I also, I guess academically, I didn't struggle academically at all. But probably socially, it was a little bit more of a challenge for me.
Cool. Horses. So how was that, man? I used to ride horses. I used to rodeo, junior rodeo when I was younger, man.
It was fun. I learned that I was allergic to horses, which, but oddly enough, after the first year, I got over it. Like, I don't know, I got used to them or something. And so it wasn't an issue at the end, but it was fun. I mean, so, in Virginia, it's very English. It was English style riding. So, jumping fences and things like that. I mean, I wasn't, it was the first time I'd ever done it. So it was fun. I enjoyed it. I don't think I've ridden a horse since then, but just because, I just never came across the opportunity, but it was enjoyable. It was something different for sure.
Oh, that's cool. So after college, what, or where'd you go from there? Because
yeah, so my first year of college was there. Second year, my family had actually moved to Wisconsin, so I actually went back up to Wisconsin, went to school for a year there, and then I went and did a mission for my church for 2 years, which was a good experience. I went to Montana and Wyoming, and we weren't allowed to ride horses. I mean, there were plenty of opportunities to ride horses in Montana and Wyoming, as you can imagine. I learned to be a cowboy. I got to we branded cattle a couple of times, which was kind of an interesting experience. I think some of those ranchers kind of were laughing at me. I'm this, kind of city kid out there and didn't really know what to do, around these cows just kind of running around. And so I'm sure that was, I don't know if it was comical or if they were concerned for my safety at some points, probably, but it was a lot of fun. Learned a lot, got to work with a lot of good people there. Came back from that and then went down to Southern Utah University, where I majored in accounting. Met my wife, got married, and that's kind of where we started our family.
Awesome, man. So you went from it just kind of fast. You went from English riding to then, being a cowboy with the big saddle horn, and then you're branding cattle and stuff. So that's pretty cool. That's awesome, man. So
yeah, it was fun.
So, like, I think to be a whole and healthy man, physical, mental, and spiritual, you got to be squared away there. It sounds like you're a spiritual man and you're still involved in and got a good solid base there. You got that from your parents and carried it on with your wife. And do you have children?
Yeah, so I have 4 kids. The oldest is a senior in high school this year. She's graduating here in a couple of months.
Wow.
And actually yesterday we were down at visiting a college that she's going to be attending in the fall. So that was a lot of fun. And then the youngest is 6. She's 6. My wife will beat me up if she hears me.
Oh yeah, right. No, I get it, man.
And then I have a 9-year-old and a 15-year-old in the middle there. So 2 girls, 2 boys. Yeah, very, very active in church. And I feel like, especially in this world, I mean, whatever faith you have, I just think it's so important to have some kind of a base of fundamental, principles that you can build off of. And again, whatever your religion or faith is, I think especially for kids, that's just so important because, without those fundamental principles, it's just so easy to, just get confused. And, there's so much going on in the world. There's so many different opinions. It can just be overwhelming. And so definitely, for me, for my family, faith is really a critical component to, to our life.
Well, and being a fan of the founding fathers too, right? And going, I mean, it was all based on God and man's inalienable rights and all that good stuff. And then you had to have that rock solid base. Yeah, especially what our kids are exposed to now versus what we were. It's out there.
Oh yeah.
There's just so much. There's cyberbullying. There's all these keyboard warriors that spew hate and whatever else. And it's good that you've got a solid base. Your parents gave you a solid base, and you're carrying that on. And I absolutely 100% agree. It starts from a spiritual level. So that's awesome. Now I see a ton of medals on the back there, and I happen to know a little bit about it. What got you into your hobby? And then I really want to kind of like, how do you prepare? Because it's got to be mental as much as physical. And then, how do you get strong there? How do you finish? And what are so like, let's dive into what got you into that, and
Sure.
how you train and all that good stuff.
Sure. So, growing up, we were always, yeah, I was a swimmer in high school. So I was always in shape. We were always active. I mean, it seems like it's much different now, but back then you just kind of run around outside all day long, right? We had, woods in our backyard, and we'd be like, I remember I found, the Army surplus store, and that was like a candy store, man. They had all kinds of cool stuff there. So we were dressed out, decked out in our fatigues, and we got paint on our face and all this kind of stuff, hiding out in the woods from each other. So I was always active, always in shape, but not really focused on any one sport necessarily. And so it wasn't until I think fairly recently, so probably, within the last 10 years, I actually had a buddy of mine introduce me to Spartan Racing, which, if some folks aren't aware, it's obstacle course racing. So it's out, on mountains, on trails and things, and you're climbing over stuff, and you're flipping tires, and you got monkey bars and those types of obstacles. And so he said, hey, you should go try one of these with me. And so I kind of decided, well, I better learn how to run a little bit, because they can be fairly long. And so I did that. And I kind of, once I started running, I don't know, you can get kind of addicted to it a bit. That runner's high is a real thing. And anyway, so I got started on the first one. It was just a blast. And then of course it seems like the evolution becomes, well, how far can you go? Because when you do the first one, that's, you're not sure. You're like, well, that's, it's a challenge, but I think I can do it. And then you do it. And then you think, okay, well, what's the next distance? And then you try a little bit of a longer distance. And there's something about taking on a challenge that you're not sure you can complete. That's makes it all the more satisfying when you do complete it. And so it was sort of that ever expanding progression. So in the context of Spartan Racing, they have kind of their 3 different distances, which is basically kind of a 5K, 10K, and half marathon distance. And then you can go all the way up to, they call it an ultra beast, which, the ultra beast would be, 2 laps of their half marathon course, so it's basically like a full marathon with obstacles, and, usually on the side of a mountain or something like that. So I did, probably my first year, I did their trifecta, and I finished kind of the 3. And I'll never forget my first beast course, which is, the half marathon distance. And I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't really know how to prepare. I was just kind of going out, and I think I found some kind of a 10K or half marathon sort of free training course online. And I just kind of followed that training plan. But nothing too, nothing too great. And it was cold. I remember it was like maybe 40 degrees, but it was like raining. It held on us. Wind was blowing, and I was just dressed in like shorts and a t-shirt. And I was out there for like 3.5 hours, and I was so cold by the time I was done. I remember at the very end, they had this obstacle where you would go down into water, and then they had kind of these heavy bags kind of, hanging. So you had to kind of work your way through them while you were in waist deep water. And I remember standing there looking at that water, and I just wanted to cry, man. I was like, I'm so cold. I just want this thing to be over with, but I see the finish line right there. And so we got through it. I'm like, what are we doing? I'm never doing this again. And then of course, a week later, I'm, doing research. All right, where's the next one? And so, you mentioned mental training is as important as physical training, and it really is. Especially when you go longer distances. So once I dipped my toe into the ultra distance, which is anything, more than a marathon distance, you can't, the first thing is you have to prepare for those, right? You can kind of, I guess, fudge your way through a 5K or a 10K if you're in reasonable shape, right? You can make it happen. But when you're going 30 miles, your body's either ready or it's not.
Right.
And usually it's not. And even with the best preparation, you're gonna run into those challenges. And so, the mental game that says, hey, my body's feeling one thing, but my mind says, you know what, it doesn't matter. We're just going to keep pushing through. And so, training for anything like that is really just an exercise in monotony. I mean, that's really all it is. There's nothing glamorous about just going and running, 5 or 10 miles a day, and then, going out on a weekend and getting, 20, 25 miles in. Because you never feel like it all the time, right? I mean, you usually feel good when you're done with it. You feel the pride of sort of accomplishing something, and certainly, there's a being healthy component to it. But you never, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 days a week you actually feel like doing it. The rest of the time you just do it because you got to do it, right?
So from a mental standpoint, I mean, do you, because I get it, in your body wants to give up. You didn't want to go in that cold water, but you're like, no, I'm going to do it, right? And you're just kind of forcing yourself. So do you do any kind of meditation? Does it come natural to you? Are you just, do you have a voice in the back of your head that makes you turn that switch when the other part wants to wimp out, give up, or your body's like, man, my knee's hurting and I don't want to cause permanent damage, and you're like, I'll be fine. What do you do?
Yeah. So, actually meditation is something that I've just, and I don't do it as regularly as I should. But that's actually one thing that, recently I've started meditating more formally, but I don't think I really understood what was happening on some of these longer distances. So when you're out there and running's like so repetitive, you're just, even, trails are a little more interesting because sometimes, you're going up and down and, sometimes you're jumping over streams and things. So it's a little more interesting, but it's pretty monotonous. And what I find is really interesting is, the first, maybe the first hour, you're like, oh, how long has it been? Oh, it's only been, 10 minutes. It's only been 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But there comes a point where it's like time's, it's almost hard to explain, but it's almost like time like speeds up, where you'll just get in these kind of flow states almost, where you just go, your brain almost like turns off. It's not so much being, it's less about making yourself do it, and it's more about, you just accepting that it is,
right,
and just going with it, right?
Wow.
And and so I find, for me at least, I'll get into these events, and after an hour or two, you're kind of hurting, but you're just doing it. And then you'll look at your watch and realize, wow, it's been like an hour. And that like flew by. And usually it's a problem because you're like, oh yeah, I was supposed to eat something, or I was supposed to drink something. Now I got to eat and drink more. But yeah, it's preparing yourself to face things that you've never faced before, is kind of an interesting challenge. And I think it's probably undervalued in your daily exercise. I mean, the act of getting out of bed in the morning to go on a 30 or 40 minute run when you really don't want to, that's like the same muscle that you have to use when you're 25 miles in and you still have 6 miles to go. And so I think that's a little undervalued sometimes, and we don't realize, you know, how important that is, and how just that act of, you know, getting up in the morning every day to go do that exercise is what's going to help you get through that last, you know, that last hour, or, you know, that last few miles of that longer event.
Yeah, that's putting in the work, right? That's it's not glamorous. It's chopping wood, it's treading water, it's doing that daily stuff. So let me ask you this, because let's say you wanted to, what's your training? And of course, you're in shape at this level, right? But let's say, what's the farthest you've ever gone?
So the farthest distance I've done to date is just a 50K, so 31 miles. It was unfortunate. I had a trip planned to go to the Grand Canyon and do rim to rim to rim, you know, where you just run across the Grand Canyon and back. And so that would have been a 50-mile adventure. But I ended up getting COVID the week before, which took me out of that running. So 31 miles is my current distance record.
Yeah, well, hats off to you there. But so you're prepping for a 31-mile race, right? And let's say, you know, well, let's first do this. If you're not prepping for a race, what do you do to stay in shape? What's a week look like for you?
So like maintenance.
Yeah.
You know, really maintenance is just doing something. Where do I go? Training is an interesting thing because you know, it's really different for everybody. So for me, I've learned that as I get older, so I'm 40. How old am I now? 41. I guess I turned 42 this year. So as I get older, I've learned that running 3 or 4 times a week is really the most I should do. That's enough to get me, you know, the endurance and this, you know, the strength that I need in order to do what I want to do. Any more than that, and I risk, you know, the potential for injury, and, you know, and I'm not training to win races. I'm just training to complete them. So for me, that's what it takes. But really doing something every day. So kind of a maintenance schedule, you know, probably 2 or 3 times a week. I'll go out and I'll run, you know, 3 to 5 miles, you know, so that's, you know, 30 to 40 minutes of running there. And then, you know, on the weekends, if I can get in a nice long run, you know, 2 or 3 weekends a month, a nice long run would be anything over 2 hours. Then that's, you know, that's enough to maintain, you know, a pretty stable base. But then on top of that, you've got to do, you know, at least 1 to 2 days a week of, you know, some kind of weight training, you know, body weight, push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, you know, just kind of those basic things. Because one of the things that's, I think, gets overlooked a lot is, and you'll learn this when you do go longer distances. It surprised me the first time I did a 50K. The muscle that hurt the worst was my lower back, which kind of surprised me. But you know, that, you know, you think about running and, you know, your calf muscles and your quads and all those, you know, leg running specific muscles. But, you know, you also think you're holding yourself upright for like, you know, 6 or 7 hours, and so you've got to work on those core muscles as well. So that's kind of what a maintenance type week would look like.
Cool. So do you do any kind of stretching? Because, you know, is that part of it too? Because, you know, I hate stretching. And you know, I used to, you know, when I was in Taekwondo, I could do the splits and kicks and all this other stuff. So I don't, you know, I'm getting stiffer. You know, I'll turn 53 this year. So it's like, you know, and I'll stretch before I work out. But, you know, I know some guys that they'll take a good 15 minutes and they're really loosening up. And I'm like, man, hats off to you. I'm just trying to get like, you know, I'm trying to get 500 hits in before I go to work, you know, on a punching bag,
right,
you know, with my sticks or whatever. So I'm, you know, and I'll loosen up. But do you do any of that, or you just kind of stay loosey goosey because of what you're doing?
Yeah, no, I actually, for runners, that's one of the things where runners are notorious for, is being really stiff, oddly enough. And I stretch a little bit, not nearly as much as I should, and it has caused me issues in the past. Um, so that's one of those do as I say, not as I do types of things.
Right,
You,
right.
you should be stretching.
Yeah.
I don't stretch nearly enough.
Because I can imagine if I'm running, I was like, hey, I want to try to run 5 miles just to see if I can. And I've done silly stuff like that before, just
Mhm.
just to see.
Right.
And then like my hamstring will be like, oh, you idiot. It's like,
Hmm.
oh man, I'm getting a cramp or whatever. All right. So
Yeah.
you got a weekly routine of maintenance, but let's say you're specifically, and this is what's always fascinated me. Like for half marathons and stuff like that. But let's say you're training for a 31 mile, it's coming up. How far out do you start? And do you run up to 13 miles twice a week to try to get in? Do you do the full length? Do you go over the full length? How do you manage? And I'm sure, over experience and time, you're kind of finding your sweet spot. But
Mhm.
today, David's got to train for a 31-mile race. It's this many weeks out. This is what I'm going to do. And then after you answer that question, I want to talk about nutrition too, because that's got to be huge, especially when you're running.
Yeah. So training for a 50K. Now again, it depends on your goals and your base. If you've got a good base, typically we look at 16-week training blocks is what a typical training block would be. Now, again, that depends on your base. So, if you've been kind of slacking for a while, you'll probably want to give yourself longer than that. But 16 weeks is enough time that you can build up and be successful. And so, what I found works for me is, and this is after, you can go online, you can look, there's all kinds of different training programs and plans out there. But really there's like kind of three key components, to a weekly training plan. And then what it does over that 16 weeks is essentially you just slowly build. You'll usually build for like 3 weeks, and then you'll dip down a little bit on week 4, and then you'll build for another 3 weeks, and then you'll take an easier week. And so you kind of ride this roller coaster as you build your endurance. But there's like key workouts, right? So it's really hard when you're training for a 31-mile race, as an example, to actually go out and run 31 miles.
Right.
You don't have to. The longest training run that I typically do before something like that, it will be 24, 25 miles. So long enough that I really stretch myself. But that's usually also building up to that peak.
Right.
So training is always, what your body's constantly adapting, right?
Mhm.
And so if I was to go do a 30-mile training run, 2 weeks before, and then go do the 30-mile race, your body's like, confused. But if you've, if you're going 8 miles, and then you're going 12 miles, and then you're going, and you're stepping up like that, and giving low recovery, and then stepping up again. If you do that at the end of the training block, right before that, you're supposed to hit that peak of that 31 miles, your body's like ready for it, right? It like knows it's coming, and you'll be a lot more successful. So the key workouts really, number one is the distance run every week. So every week you want to go on one longer run at least, and you want that long distance run to be 2 hours or more. 2 hours is like the magic window, where if you hold an aerobic state for the 2 hours, meaning you're not going out and you're not sprinting for 2 hours, it's actually pretty slow, right? So your 2 hour run may not be that long in terms of distance, but you're maintaining that aerobic pace for the entire 2 hours. And then once you hit that 2 hour threshold, it's like a switch flips in your body, and all kinds of changes start happening. Your lungs start getting more efficient, your blood cells start doing their thing better, and your whole system just like you start to enter that sort of fine-tuned phase.
Mhm.
So if you can get more than 1 2-hour run in a week, that's better. But at minimum, you want one of those. Then you're going to want to do a speed workout during the week, because you got to get those muscles firing, right? So a speed workout will usually be, you'll have kind of two of them. You'll have an interval based workout where if you were to go to a track, for example, you just walk around the track one time, and then you'd run a little bit of a faster pace for a lap, then you'd walk for a lap, then you run a little bit of a faster pace for a lap. And that's really just to wake up the muscles, wake up your legs, and get everything firing and used to working right. And then kind of the third sort of critical workout that you would do, they call it kind of a fartlek, which is you do it. It's kind of a weird word. I'm not even sure where it comes from. It's probably like from Finland or something, but yeah. And you can do it a couple of different ways, but essentially those are a little bit longer runs. So if you're going to go out for like an hour, for example, you might run slow for 5 minutes, and then pick up the pace for 5 minutes, then run slower for 5 minutes. It's almost an interval type workout, except it's more sort of at pace, if that makes sense. And then you work out, you do some threshold runs too, where you just you start out kind of slow, and then you just push your tempo up over time. But really, unless unless you're some sort of an elite really fast runner, ultra distance running is just about being consistent over time. You're not setting land speed records. You're just moving at a steady pace for several hours.
So let's talk about nutrition, and then I want to talk about the equipment you use when you're running, like what type of watch. Maybe you can give what you use, and do you wear a heart monitor, or is that on your watch? So let's talk about nutrition daily, and then or weekly, and then like nutrition prep, and then also it fascinates me when you're like how many hours is say a 31-mile race?
So my time is typically 6.5 hours.
So in that six and a half hours, you got to eat and drink stuff, obviously, and you're running, and so I want to dig into what you carry, and like how much do you consider weight and all that other stuff. And then I can't imagine, like, whenever if I try to drink water, well, I can get out of breath and I can screw my timing up. Then I'm like, but I could like eating, but I guess you get used to it. But yeah, let's talk about your normal nutrition. Are you generally not eating crap and taking care of your body, and are you mindful of that? And then like nutrition when it comes to prepping, and then while you're on the run itself.
Yeah, so nutrition while you're training is pretty important. One of the things that and it's one of the things I've always kind of struggled with, because part of the challenge is when you're deep into training and you're putting in a lot of work, you can eat a lot of calories, and then you stop, and then your race comes up or whatever, and then you continue to eat those calories without putting in all that work, and then you start to put on the pounds, then you got to cut back, and it's like this roller coaster. And I apologize, I think I have a train going by in the background. Hopefully can't hear that too loud. But so really nutrition, the thing that happens for me is when I start to work out consistently, making good nutrition choices is like natural. For some reason, when you're working your body hard, like eating a salad just sounds better, right? So lots of fruits, lots of vegetables. I try and do more of a like high fat, high protein, low carb type diet. I really like bread, and so I've never been successful at totally cutting out carbs. I like my Dave's Killer bread. It's just good stuff.
Oh yeah, we get that. Yeah, we get that. I love it too. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I don't really watch my macros or count calories or do anything like that. I just try to make smart decisions. You know, the critical thing is to make sure you're eating the right thing before your long runs and after your long runs.
Yeah.
And again, I've tried lots of different things, and so you know, for me, what works is I have to I have to eat a lot of protein before, like the night before. So usually high protein food. Like if I eat a steak, you know, the night before a long run, I'll usually have a better long run versus eating, you know, a plate of spaghetti or something like that. So that's just how it works for me.
That's awesome,
Now when you
man.
when
Steak.
you
Who doesn't want to eat steak and then be successful in a friggin' 6-hour run the next day? That's awesome.
right. Yeah, when it comes to what your nutrition during the race, that is super important. The joke is running an ultra marathon is really just like running from one picnic to the next. I mean, you go to these ultra marathons and they have these aid stations set up every couple miles. And, you know, these things will have everything, you know, they'll have cookies, you got chips, you got, you know, there's one I like to do that's a local one I've done a couple of times, and they've got this one station where they'll fix you a hamburger the way you want it, right? You tell them how you want your hamburger.
That's
They'll cook you up a
awesome,
hamburger.
man. That's awesome. I never
So,
would have thought. What's the name of that
yeah.
race in case someone listening wants to?
That's the Huff in central Indiana. So it's a long, it's actually that particular race is known for having, I think, the heaviest award. They give away like the person who wins it gets like this giant rock or something with their name engraved on it. It's kind of fun. But so eating, anybody will tell you the key to success in an ultra marathon is eat early and eat often. And so usually that looks like a lot of gels. You know, you experiment with, you know, different types of, you know, the little gels that you can carry along with you, and there's all kinds of different ones. You know, some people bring, you know, Snicker bars and you know, payday bars, you know, with lots of nuts in them and those kinds of things.
What's the primary stuff in the gel? Is it calories?
Oh, it's straight carbs.
Okay, straight carbs. Yeah.
Yeah. So usually it'll be primarily carbs, and sometimes they'll have some electrolytes in there.
Okay.
And so you'll almost always be wearing some kind of a vest. So I like, you know, Solomon makes really nice vests. They're really form fitting. You know, they're very slim. They're not bulky at all, and you can carry all kinds of stuff in these things. And so you'll carry, you know, a good supply of gels. You'll carry, you know, whatever snacks you want, but also, you know, do some research and know what's at the aid station, so you know what to take there. Because the other thing that happens is on these long runs, all of a sudden things that normally shouldn't be good are really good. You know, for example, pickle juice is something that's pretty popular at aid stations, and I would never drink pickle juice normally, but late in a race when it's hot, pickle juice is just really good. I can't even tell you why, but it's so all of a sudden weird things just start sounding good. And that's one of the key components is training too, is you have to try these things on your long runs, right? So usually on my longest runs, I'll pack up with all kinds of different things, and then, you know, I'll try a different gel, or I'll try, you know, maybe a candy bar. See how I feel eating a candy bar when I'm really tired, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. But you're going to want to, you're going to want to put down calories every probably 20-30 minutes.
Okay.
Consistently. You know, your body can only process, you know, I think it's like 300 or 400 calories an hour. Is all your body can really work with. But you've got to keep feeding it.
Yeah, you got to have something in queue, so when that hour's up or whatever that time's up, something's already going into that time slot, right? So
yeah, exactly. And you're drinking a lot of water. You know, you're usually carrying some kind of bottles. You know, my vest, it carries 2 bottles kind of in the front. And they're like soft flasks, so they're not rigid. It's just it's a soft material, and it's easy to fill up. And so you're drinking and you're eating a lot on these things.
How many pounds do you start off with?
Yeah, so when on my last one, I think my pack was around 5 pounds.
Okay.
So again, unless you're doing something that's unsupported. Now, when I was looking at doing the Grand Canyon, which I didn't end up going to, but that was more like, I think I weighed out at like 12 pounds on that one, because I had to carry everything, everything with me, enough food, safety supplies, and those kinds of things. It's a little bit easier on a supported race where you're going to have an aid station every 5 or 6 miles that you can restock your water and get extra calories in, and those kinds of things. But you mentioned eating while running can be kind of awkward, and that is one of the, actually, like, professional marathon runners, that they'll practice that, right? When they're when they're training, they'll have the table set up just like they would in a race, and they'll practice grabbing the cup and drinking it. Fortunately, in ultra marathon running, everything's a lot slower. So you usually have time, usually on a hill, when you're power hiking up a hill, that's a good time to, drink a little bit and eat a little bit, because you never want to stop if you don't have to.
I bet mentally that kind of fries you too, right?
That's a pitfall, is to say, oh, I'll just take a 5-minute break and then I'll feel refreshed. Now, if you're going really long distances, then you do have to do that kind of stuff. But for something like a 50K, it's best just to stay on your feet and keep moving.
Okay. Awesome. So you talked about Solomon is a good brand for the vest. So what kind of watch do you have? What all does it do as far as marking? I know some cell phones can mark your trail and kind of you can look at your time. So what do you have for equipment?
So I have a Garmin. I've actually got it here. You see it there. Okay. So I use a Garmin Fenix. What is it? This is an older one. I think they're up to a 6 or a 7. I think this is like a 3. But these are really good watches. I mean, I've had this one for many years, and it's still hanging in there. What's kind of cool about these is, like, this glass, which you probably can't see it, but it's like still in like pristine condition. I've worn this on, I don't know, a dozen Spartan races where you're climbing through rocks and mud and stuff, and they've got this glass that just does not scratch, so that's keeps it looking good. But they do really cool things. I mean, it does have a feature where it'll map your trail, where you've been. So if you do, if you're doing backcountry stuff and you get lost, you can kind of like, retrace your steps. I do wear a heart rate monitor when I run. This watch does have, the wrist monitoring, but that's not normally quite as accurate.
Right.
So I do use a heart rate strap when I run. But it'll do, I use it only for running, but these things, I mean, it has functionality for every kind of sport. You can set it up with alerts, right? So if you're doing some of these workouts where you want to be in specific heart rate ranges, you can pre-program those so that when you go to that option, it'll beep at you if you're above or below.
Okay.
Which is kind of funny. I did a 5K here recently where I wasn't training for it at all. I just kind of jumped into it. It was just kind of a fun. It was like the turkey trot, I think. And so I went to the race function, and I forgot that I had previously programmed that for a race I'd done before to alert me if I was running too slow because I wanted to hit a certain pace. And it kept beeping at me this whole race because I was running too slow. So I actually had to turn it off and restart it.
Awesome.
But I mean, it has the weather. I mean, these watches, they'll do everything. They're very, very capable. Another good brand is the Coros.
Okay.
And one of the things that's a challenge is battery life on these. Now this one, I probably charge this every, I don't know, 10 days or so. So it's got some pretty good battery life to it. But Coros is a brand that's known for battery life. So if anybody wants a watch that will, if you're doing some kind of a 24-hour or more type event and you need a battery that'll last that long, Coros is one of those watches that'll do that.
Is that Quoros or OU?
I think it's K.
Okay.
I think it's Koros.
Okay.
Because this one, I've never had it die on me because I've never done anything long enough, but I think probably after 12 or 13 hours of continual GPS usage, that's probably about all this watch would be able to support.
So your heart monitor, David, does it talk to you? Does it keep you, do you just read it after the race to see what it says or what?
No, it syncs with the watch. And so
nice. I got you.
So usually what I'll do is I have, you can set it up in different ways. But I'll usually have like a split screen where it's showing me, my pace, it's showing me my heart rate, and then it's showing me my time.
Looks like you froze on me, buddy. Hopefully I get you back.
You can get that feedback that tells you, where you're at. And one of the connection.
Yeah, we got kind of a connection problem. So let me see what I can do. I don't know if it's
your watch and your heart rate is spiked and all this kind of stuff, and you're like, well, I'm not looking really good here. Or other times you'll be like, man, I don't feel really good, but then you look at your your numbers and you're like, well, I'm still in the range I'm supposed to be, and I should be fine. So it's some people don't, I guess, different people have different approaches. Some people prefer to just kind of go by feel, but I kind of like the objective feedback a little bit. I think it helps me make better decisions.
There you go. What about shoes? That's got to be important.
Yeah, it is. That's I have a huge shoe collection. Okay. And shoes really, again, the reason I have so many shoes is because you kind of have different shoes for every application. So the brand of shoes that I like best is Ultra. Ultra is a shoe brand that's known for making kind of a foot-shaped shoe, right? So they're a little wider in the toe box. And I have kind of big feet anyway, so that just works better for me. But the other thing that happens to you when you run a long distance is your feet do start to swell, and it helps to have a little extra room in your shoe. The other thing you have to look at is, traction. There's a variety of, even if you're running trail, if it's a hard packed trail, you can get away with running just regular, road running shoes. But for what I do, Spartan Racing or more rugged type events, you want something that's pretty grippy. I don't have any like handy, but yeah, you want some good, when you get into shoes, there's all kinds of different shoes you can get that support you in different ways for different running styles. Yeah. And Ultra is a 0 drop shoe. So, it's just flat. It's a very natural running shoe. And that seems to work best for me, at least.
So how do you deal with blisters? Because I've heard about guys in marathons, they'll put Band-Aids over their nipples because the shirt can rub them raw. And what do you do as far as that? And then what if you get some mean blister because you decided to not break your shoes in, or just that pair of shoes didn't rub a blister when you were training, and now all of a sudden you're like, holy crud, I'm about to free bleed into my shoe, and your mind's like, that's got to be a big hole. I need to pad that up, or what do you use and carry?
Yeah, so you always got to be on the lookout for those hot spots. You'll start to feel it, and as soon as you start to feel it, you need to address it before it becomes a serious issue. Right. So I'll always carry some kind of a oh gosh, I can't. can't even think of the name right now of what I use. Trail toes.
Okay.
Is kind of the lubricant that I use, and that works. That'll work on your nipples. That'll work on, if because sometimes even carrying a vest, sometimes it'll run and rub oddly in different places, and sometimes it'll do it even when it's never done it before. You'll be out on a race and you'll be like, man, that's never been an issue before, but it is now. So always have some of that handy. You can just kind of rub on there, and it just allows things to slide over your skin a little bit better.
Okay.
I like to carry rock tape or some sort of kinesiology tape with me, just in little strips, because that works well to cover sections of skin, and it'll form to the skin a little bit, and it's a little flexible. So that's something that I like to use. So if I got something, say on a toe or a foot, I might put a Band-Aid on it, but then I'd want to put some of that tape over it just to hold everything in place. If you get a super bad blister, I guess in Boy Scouts we learn never to pop blisters, but I always pop them. Pop them, put some lubricant on them, and then slap a Band-Aid over it, and hope it doesn't get any worse. Really though, if you've trained with your equipment and you're not doing anything, the number one rule is never try something new on race day, right? You shouldn't really run into that too much. Although, the one thing that'll happen is, you can, especially if you're going downhill a lot, your toes bang into the front of your foot as you're going downhill, or into the front of your shoe right downhill. And you have had cases where I've got blisters underneath your toenails, which then causes your toenail to have to be removed. I mean, that's kind of annoying. I have had that happen. But definitely always carry some lubricant with you, and some extra tape, and a Band-Aid or two. And hopefully you don't have to use them, but it's something you're going to want to have.
Yeah, better to have it not need it than need it not have it, right?
Absolutely.
Sweet. So hey, you and I met. Man, I appreciate all this. I've been taking notes and writing stuff down, because I've got some like padded tape, and like there used to be a thing called moleskin that you could put on blisters and stuff like that, but I can't. Like there was one first aid cabinet I was at one of my sites up north for work, and I was looking in the first aid cabinet, and I had some blister from whatever, and I was looking at this Band-Aid, and it was like moleskin, and I was like, oh, and I was like, this stuff is amazing, and
yeah,
like it's hard as hell to find. I mean, I could probably look it up. It's probably on Amazon, probably not as, but I mean, that was it sealed it, it formed to the skin, it covered it, and it added it all in the same. But no, I was curious about that. But you and I met at like a leadership seminar, and we got to know each other there. But so aside from all this cool stuff we're talking about, what kind of business are you doing? What, like working, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about what you're trying to do, or what you are.
Sure. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. I've been on kind of this entrepreneurial exploration over the last, I guess it's been almost a year now. It's been going on a year. And I've learned a lot. I've met a lot of great people, and I've changed directions a couple of times, because really, what I found for me is, and you've obviously found it, for yourself with the Knight's Path there, but really finding what is kind of your purpose and passion.
Yep.
I mean, professionally, I'm in logistics and transportation for a company, so I manage trucks, all these trucks running all over the place. We have 50 some odd manufacturing facilities in North America, and my team works with these plants to, contract the right carriers to move, to basically deliver their products to their customers. And it's kind of a career path that I've worked with the same company for 15 years now, and I just kind of took the next opportunity and, kind of ended up here. it wasn't necessarily, something that, I set out to accomplish.
Right.
And I certainly wouldn't call it my dream job. And so for me, it's really been a path of exploration, trying to fine tune and hone in on, what's kind of a mission that I can stand behind, and how can I serve people.
Yeah.
And really what I've settled on is, and really what I'm in the process of launching right now is gathering people together who really kind of want to break out of this middle class, I call it kind of a middle class prison.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
well, I say, kind of the interesting, people always ask me, well, what would you consider middle class? If I make this much to this much, am I in the middle class? And really, middle class isn't about dollars as much as it is mindset.
Yep.
And how you view money, and sort of your motivation behind how you accumulate money, what you do with money. There's this huge void in our education system and in our society in general in terms of the right way to handle money. And unfortunately, a lot of sort of the common knowledge kind of keeps you trapped in this middle class prison. Even everybody's an investor in their 401k, right? But you're not really an investor. And there aren't many people who really got financially wealthy with their 401k. I mean, if you do it right, you can retire comfortably and things will be okay. But we're looking for more of an exciting life, the way we want to live it. And so I'm in the process right now of launching a group to support people that want to break out of that middle class prison, by bringing in resources and kind of breaking through those those sort of outdated philosophies. What's the money mindset that we're all pre-programmed with? It's just really just garbage and just isn't working, right? And what are the things that we can do that do work? And so I'm excited. Here in the next week or two, I'll be launching that, and I'm excited to bring that to folks. And one of the big differences, I think, between sort of the middle class and call it the upper class, I mean, those are very broad categories. It's a difference between working for and working to provide value. And if you can make that switch to where you're working to provide value to people, suddenly the money takes care of itself.
Yep.
Let's go into a job. And it's almost like if you take the money out of the equation, the money takes care of itself. It's kind of this this strange dichotomy, but anyway, so we're launching that. I'm calling that Middle Class Renegades.
Oh, nice.
I'm also in the process of launching a YouTube channel. One of the things that I enjoy doing, partially because my current job has me commuting a lot, so I spend a lot of time in the car, so I get to listen to a lot of books. And so I'm launching a YouTube channel here in the next week or two, where I'm going to be featuring 5-minute book reviews, where I'm going to break down, just in a quick 5-minute little video that says, hey, this is who wrote it. This is what the book is about. Here are the highlights. And then, provide my feedback in terms of whether, that should be on your list or not. So those are some of the projects in the works that I'm pretty excited about coming up.
Sweet. So like your middle class renegades, is it a group? Is basically sounds like a kind of a coaching platform, right?
Yeah. So we're going to kick it off as a Facebook group.
Okay.
Part of the fun of this is, I'm not I'm not going to put myself up on the pedestal as the financial genius and the success, right? I'm learning these things along with everybody else. So my hope is that as I learn these things, I can bring that information to the group and it can provide some value there. Oddly enough, it kind of ties into that sort of ultra marathon mindset where it's really just it's a game of playing with things, right? You're always fidgeting with the formula, trying to get it right. And everybody's coming from a different background. Everybody's in a little bit of a different place. So it's going to look a little bit different for everybody, but kind of the same principles apply, right? And so we're going to start it off as a Facebook group and then evolve it from there.
Sweet. Well, shoot me any links if people want to get a hold of you. I'll put it down in the description when I post this. But man, this has been a great. Thanks for spending a little over an hour with me, man. I appreciate that. This has been awesome.
Yeah, hey, time flies when you're having fun. I appreciate the time today. It's been great.
You bet, David. Well, hey, all my wishes for success for you in the future. We're pals. Reach out if you need anything, and I'll do the same.
Will do.
All right, brother.
All right, take care, Matt.
You bet. Take it easy.